But I think they're ready.
Good afternoon. It's Friday afternoon of the show, the 2024 National Honey Show, and we have with us Enid, our Chief Judges Referee, for a chat this afternoon about judging honey. So Enid, you keep bees yourself.
I do, yes.
And this is in Scotland. What part of Scotland, and what's the forage like around where you are?
I'm on the east side of Scotland between Edinburgh and Perth, which is probably the easiest way to describe the area. It's particularly good, quite agricultural, and I tend not to move hives a lot, but where they're situated, there's generally good forage for most of the season.
Do you get heather as well?
I do get heather honey. I've got a permanent sort of heather site where I can keep the bees all year round, and it's a slightly different management, but it's fine.
So you don't have to carry them to and fro. You can just leave yours there on site.
I can leave them. Yeah, it's good being able to move your colonies around from one crop to another, but it's jolly hard work. And I just now find it's much easier to have a permanent site for them, and they cope fine. Yeah,
that's excellent. So, what's your career path into not just becoming a honey judge, but becoming our judges referee? You're in charge of not just the judging, but booking the judges, making sure that it all runs smoothly, and also a lot of training. You do a lot of bringing the new ones along and exams. So what was your route, and what is the general route into this?
Funnily, I wasn't even interested in beekeeping before I moved to the village, to Scotland Well, and I just announced to the family that I wanted to take up beekeeping, to their surprise. And my grandfather was very interested. My father and grandfather kept bees. My grandfather was very interested in showing honey and sometimes judging, and I wanted to follow his route. And I started entering our local show and learning by the mistakes I made. And one time my mother said, "Would you like to go down to the National Honey Show, which is in London?" And I said, "Yeah." So we both went down, and that's when I was at Kensington Town Park. And since then, I have only missed one honey show, and that was one of the years when it was at Hendon. But I've been at every one since then, obviously not during the COVID years when there wasn't a show. And I stewarded, was a judge's steward for long enough. I was entering the classes, mainly soft set and granulated, because when you're travelling by train, I found that they were the easiest to transport. And then I took my Scottish Honey Judge exam, and Margaret Davis, I was a couple of years and I was asked to be one of the judges down here. And then the late Margaret Davis approached us and said, "Tell me," she said, "how would you like to sit your BBK Honey Judge exam?" And I thought, why? I've got my Scottish one. And then she explained a bit more about it all. And she said, "Would you like to be my assistant?" And Margaret Davis was the judge's referee at that time. So it was quite an honour to be asked by Margaret Davis. She was an amazing person. And a couple of years later, she said, "Right, you're taking over." And I became the judge's referee. And I must say, I really enjoy it. It's fascinating. It could be, not say stressful, but it's good fun, and you've got problems to sort out as well.
Right. So anybody really thinks that they could just come along and it'd be really fun to taste honey and decide which one you like the best. But it's not actually quite as simple as that, is it? So
no,
you start out by, first of all, being a beekeeper and producing honey yourself.
I think it makes a difference if you have your own bees and producing honey, because I'm sure you understand the whole process a lot better. You're obviously tasting your own honey, so you get to know the different flavours of whatever your bees are foraging from. And you've also got to be interested in showing honey, and well, if you start off by showing at your small local shows and hopefully get a bit of feedback from the judge, that way you know how to improve, you're encouraged to have a go at the next level. And then when you start to have a go at the bigger shows, you don't get the same opportunity for feedback because sometimes there's just too many exhibits and there's just not enough time for the judges to leave notes for everyone. But it's a constant sort of learning process, and you've got to be prepared to move around and just put the time in to show. And if you get the opportunity to steward for the judge, even better.
So there's a lot to learn. I've heard that people like Margaret Davis and yourself are so experienced that there's just such a wealth of things to learn about the presentation of honey, about what you're looking for, about assessing the quality and what could have gone wrong when it was produced. And generally, you have a scoring system. You're looking at more than just one thing, aren't you, when you're judging a jar of honey?
You are. You never stop learning. And in 30 years of beekeeping, you're still picking up tips and everything. But when you're actually judging, you've got to be looking at the external part of the exhibit first. If it's, say, 2 jars, are the jars matching? Are the lids matching? Is the external appearance, is it clean? There's not a lot of finger marks on the jar and everything. And then you get moved to the next stage where you open the jar and check for aroma and everything. There's a lot to it.
So the idea behind showing honey is for encouraging you to present your own honey for sale in the best way that you can, and so that it's the best quality that you can give the consumer.
Definitely. I think if you can prepare your honey for showing, then you should have a good quality product to sell. I've been into farm shops, other places where there's honey, sometimes local honey for sale, and you can see problems.
I'm almost tempted sometimes to leave a little note about the judging quality of this honey.
Yeah, no, and I think those people, if they entered shows and that, they would learn a lot, and I think their exhibit would improve, because you don't want to go into a shop and buy a jar of honey and it's got bees' legs or a bit of wing in it or anything. It's not very pleasant.
Interesting. Yes, certainly.
I'm not saying that's what you find all the time, but occasionally,
yes.
Very occasionally.
So for the learning curve, for somebody who's starting out, perhaps got a few years of beekeeping behind them and gets interested, they need to start with their local shows, because local associations each have their own annual show for honey. And after that, there is the county shows. And when judges go round to those shows, because if you become a honey judge, then it's an active occupation where you're invited to go to all sorts of interesting county shows. And I know judges who like judging in certain shows because they have an entry class for chocolates, honey chocolates. And I think that's quite one of the privileges of being a honey judge.
You do. If there's baking or chocolates, it's rather nice going through some of these classes. And some of the exhibits are exceptional, and you get the odd one that's maybe not so good. But
again, for the person that's not so good, they should treat it as a learning curve.
Definitely. Yeah, very much.
And that's some of the workshops that we have here at the National Honey Show and in other places as well, so that you learn the techniques for presenting, and you learn from some of the people who are year on year winners in certain classes, whether it's the wax presentation or honey, what their techniques are, how you can learn yourself to present better and to win the prizes and knock them off the top spots.
Yeah, I do think the workshops are very important. And if you attend the workshops for learning how to prepare your honey for show and exhibiting, I think you'll pick up a lot of tips at these workshops.
So that's what I find at these shows, that people are really very generous with their information and their help.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure you must find it quite frustrating that you can't impart more help at a show. We've got 2,500 exhibits. You can't individually give feedback to all those. But we've introduced some classes where you can give feedback.
Class 5, 6 and 7.
And what are those for?
Class 5 is the run honey, class 6 is set, and class 7 is wax. And we introduced these classes specifically so we could give feedback. And there is a form filled in and available for everybody to see. And it does help a lot because, as you said, with 2,500 exhibits, okay, some of those exhibits are judged prior to the show. But for example, the photographs, the essays, newsletter.
So those are judged externally. They are sent for judge. They're earlier classes. We have to send in our entry forms mid-September.
There is a set date by which time you've got to have these entries in. And it just gives the allocated judges time to sort of look at them properly instead of rushing it on the day. Because some of the newsletters, they're very good. It's amazing what goes into some newsletters. And but you've got to be fair to the exhibitors and give the judge time to study them properly.
Yeah. So at the show itself, you have a briefing first thing, very, very early on a Thursday morning. Hopefully all the exhibits are in place and you're raring to go. So you have a briefing, you have your judges and your stewards. And what are some of the recommendations that you give them? Because some of them are here year on year and are pretty familiar with the system and the classes.
Yeah. First of all, we have a subcommittee for a schedule subcommittee, and each year we go over the schedule and make the odd alteration. So we do try and emphasise to both judges and their stewards that it's important to read the schedule and familiarise yourself with the class that they are about to judge. There could easily be the odd alteration made to the wording or just clarify something in that particular class.
Because we're moving forwards all the time, aren't we? We introduce new classes and we make adjustments so that things are better.
That's right. You know, there are a couple of classes this year where we've decided we need to maybe look at the wording for that and just to clarify things a bit. And then we've got ideas of introducing another class, which would, for the juniors, for example, you know, because it's so important to encourage the juniors. But yes, you know, it's encouraging the judges and the stewards to check the schedule before the judge. And again, the most important job for the stewards is to check what duplicate entries there are and make sure they judge the duplicate entries first, because they can only win one award. Yep.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, Enid, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us?
I think everybody should. It's great fun. Have a go at exhibiting because it's the best way to learn. And I've been coming down here for, I'm not sure how many years now. And you meet so many different people. And because I've been coming down here, I've been going to other shows, I've ended up being invited abroad. Earlier this year, I was judging in South Africa. So it's fascinating.
And it's a big world.
You end up with friends all over the world, or acquaintances, from all over the world. It's really good. It's an amazing hobby, actually, beekeeping. And, to go down the judging line is fascinating as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.